Tonight, the Trump's legal team met again today to prepare for the report's release, Mueller's report this Thursday, and that White House staff will do the same over the next 2 days. Additionally, Rudy Giuliani told Politico in a series of middle-of-the-night texts that the president's counter report has been edited and is now at 34 or 35 pages. He says the more concise, the better. 400 pages is a novel. Kristen, a couple of questions to you. Retaliation. I mean, this is not exactly, human resources, but you have a president of the United States who may not like the behavior of his team if they talk the truth.
Well, that's right. And look, that is why you have this counter report that's at the ready, that has been prepared by the president's legal team, because they want to rebut anything that they find to be damaging once that report is released, even though we do know that significant portions of it will be redacted. But I've been told, based on my conversations with the president's legal team, that they haven't made any final decisions about how much of that counter report they are going to release and what the final language of it will be. So this is still very much a moving target, Chris. We know that both the White House and the president's outside legal team want to have a very rapid initial response. But then I think they're going to have to sort of sort through the details in the report, as we all are going to have to. And then after that, you'll see a more robust response, possibly an hour or several hours once we have time to digest all of it. But again, that counter report, they've been holding on to it because if there is, in fact, damaging information, they want to be able to respond forcefully, Chris.
Glenn, there'll be three categories of people I can think of. There's probably more who watch this Mueller report when we get hands on it Thursday morning. One will be the president, who can, with the help of his lawyers, figure out who's talking. There'll be Congress people who are just as smart. They'll know who's talking. The reading public, led by the New York Times and other organizations, will be able to figure this out. The congressman was skeptical about what can they cover up. How much can they cover? He said they can cover up people who haven't been indicted. You mentioned the president of the United States hasn't been indicted, so no dirt on Trump. What would be the point of the Mueller report, which is on Trump, has no dirt on Trump? Yeah, what would be the point of the damn thing? I'm sorry, I'm questioning the very logic of this exercise.
Yeah, let's hope it's not going to be a technicolor cover-up, right? And I agree with the congressman that there is this new category that apparently Barr made up out of whole cloth, a peripheral person privacy privilege. There's a lot of alliteration. There's no substance because there's no such thing.
That's supposed to be the Hillary role, right? Yeah. This is what Comey did to Hillary. He doesn't want to do that.
That dog doesn't hunt. I mean, you can't. These two situations are not comparable. Hillary wasn't president. Trump is. So I hope what we see gives everybody enough information to actually glean what's going on here. And here's the thing. It's all coming out at some point, whether through a court battle. Yeah. Somehow the unredacted report will come out. And if Barr is perceived as having suppressed damaging information to the president just to try to protect the president, it will end badly both for the president and for Barr.
I hope it.
I just want to make one more point about the witness intimidation. That's a crime. Witness and victim and informant intimidation violates 18 U.S.C. 1315, not just violent retaliation or intimidation, but nonviolent, where you interfere with somebody's economic livelihood, you try to get them fired or what have you. It's very serious business. I mean, the rule of law, our system of justice operates.
Does Trump know this law?
Well, you know,
he's an executive. He has all power, as you point out. He says he believes he can do anything to any employee of the federal government.
And unfortunately, his attorney general agrees with him. But look, the whole point of having a democratic system of government instead of a monarchical system of government is that the rule of law binds everybody, including the president. Nobody's above the law.
We like that. Anyway, the president continued to attack the investigation itself today, tweeting, "The greatest scam in political history. If the mainstream media were honest, which they are not, the story would be bigger and more important than Watergate someday." I guess he's talking about the investigators. Here's what he said about the Mueller report in an interview in Minnesota last night.
I heard it's going to come out on Thursday. That's good. And there can't be anything there because there was no crime. There was no anything. The crime was committed by the other side. This crime was all made up. It was all a fabrication.
Here it is, the talking points. No collusion proven, therefore obstruction is irrelevant.
Yeah. And
that's what he's going to say.
And I find that interesting that they're talking about rebutting the Mueller report, which they also claim totally exonerates. Now, if something totally exonerated me, I'm probably not going to try to rebut it. That wouldn't be wise.
Much less suppress it.
Much less suppress it. And so, you know, we have to wait and see. It looks like Thursday morning is going to be sort of the truth or consequences moment.
But his argument is I wasn't one of the Watergate burglars, so you can't get rid of me as president.
It is not the case that just because there's no collusion, there was no obstruction. First of all, collusion is
That's
not
his
a
argument,
crime.
not mine.
But I mean, this is their big talking point. It's not true. Martha Stewart went to prison for obstructing justice, not for the underlying insider trading. She was never convicted of that. People can try to obstruct justice because they think they're guilty, even if they're not. They can try to obstruct justice because they are guilty, but the prosecutors aren't able to find enough evidence against them. Or they can try to obstruct justice because they're trying to protect someone else, or they're trying to keep secrets. So there are lots of people are convicted of obstructing justice, even without the underlying crime. Even
everybody watching now understands. Thank you so much for that. That was an education, by the way. Thank you, Professor, as Congressman and all these things you are. Anyway, thank you. NBC's Kristen Welker, you're always great to come on the show. U.S. Congressman Jamie Rasky, he's our Congressman now, and Glenn Kirshner.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.